It started with Confederate statues. You know, these are people that lost the war and that most people in this country probably don't know about, and to be completely honest, probably don't care about. Now, there are people in the South and in certain areas that do like their statues, but it was a very tough argument because you had a lot of people saying, hey, man, the Confederates lost. These statues were put up in like the early 1900s, not even just after the Civil War. So how about we get rid of them? I'll tell you, my stance was put them in a museum. I think it's a way better place for them anyway, because then you could actually learn all about the history of the Civil War. And I think that'd be really cool. Then you could put up a plaque or something so we never forget what was there and why it was there. Well, then they graduated to, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, proving Donald Trump was right. You see, there was a point, I think it was just after Charlottesville, where Donald Trump said, where do they stop? They want to tear down a Confederate? What's next? Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, hey, they own slaves. Do they come down? And the media laughed. And John Oliver said, it's current year, Donald Trump. Of course they're not going to tear down George Washington. And then they tore down George Washington and Jefferson. And Hans Christian Heg, a Civil War hero who fought for the side of the Union, a staunch abolitionist who died, sacrificing his life for the greater good. They tore his statue down too. And then for some reason, they tore down a statue of Frederick Douglass, who himself was a slave, who became a free man, who was awesome, by the way, and then fought for civil rights and an end to slavery. Truly an amazing American hero. Well, now they've come for Abraham Lincoln. Are you kidding me? The dude signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Come on. Oh, but you see, the narrative can't stop. The train can't slow down. They can't just say, we've done it. We've done away with the evil slave owners. Now they're coming after the guy who literally ended slavery, and it's sending me like a confusing mixed message. Oh, but there's a reason, you see. This was the Indigenous Day of Rage. Theodore Roosevelt and Abraham Lincoln must come down because they were expansionists, and they stole Native American land. And I'll tell you this is actually interesting. A lot of people don't know this. You should drive across the country and you'll see, I mean, it's recent history. Some of these rulings that took land away from Native Americans, like the 1900s, like no joke, like early 1900s. We grew up in this country where we have California to, New York, sea to shining sea. And we're not used to the fact that there was a period where there was still ongoing fights over Native American land versus the country of the United States. There was a recent Supreme Court ruling that actually said, I think half of, Oklahoma? Or is it Kansas? I can't remember. Half of, I think it was Oklahoma, of the state is now a Native American reservation. And it's because these treaties and these rulings, they're actually still relatively recent. Now, I think for the most part, the last people, no one's alive from when these treaties were enacted or anything. But the main point is, well, to wrap up on that thought, I just got to tell you, look, man, we're where we are. The boundaries are drawn where they are. We'll respect people's rights. We must, and we'll try and move forward to make sure everybody's prosperous. I think we as a society have moved past the point of seizing lands with the Geneva Conventions and the Hague Conventions and stuff like that. I mean, you'd like to think so, but I mean, not really, but hopefully, at least here in the U.S., fine. Here's what's happening. The left has their racism narrative. And so when they're like, the Confederate statues must come down, it's their excuse to the left to say, this is why we're destroying pieces of American history. I'm no fan of the Confederacy. Good riddance. Put them in a museum, I guess. But they're destroying them. That I'm not okay with. And they're not doing it by vote. They tore down Christopher Columbus. And then I say, put him in a museum. Listen, I think about Columbus. He didn't discover the Americas. First of all, he landed in the Bahamas. Second of all, there were already people there. So which one of them discovered it? In terms of a Eurocentric view, he did discover it. And I think if people want to look up to him because he's a symbol of their culture and where they come from, that's fine. There are people that Native Americans look up to that I probably never even heard of, and that's fine too. Probably some people who killed a lot of people too, especially in, in North America during colonial expansion and stuff like that. They're probably really horrible things. The point is, we don't cherish the bad. We get rid of it, and we cherish the good. So first, we got rid of the slave owners and First, we got rid of the Confederates, sort of. Then it was all slave owners. Now it's just presidents. The real goal, in my opinion, of what Antifa is doing in tearing down these statues is trying to just erase symbols of American history. They hate this country. They don't want it to exist. They want to replace it with nothing. They are just, it is a kind of, mind virus rage where they just go around angry, smashing things for no reason. They don't want discussion. They don't want reason. They don't want peace. They don't want prosperity. They want retribution for perceived slights. How much you want to bet the people who pulled down these statues aren't even indigenous? It's just anger. It's an addiction. It's a paranoid delusion. Here's a story from Oregon Live. Portland protesters topple statues of Theodore Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln in Day of Rage. Police declare riot. A group of protesters toppled statues of former presidents Theodore Roosevelt and Abraham Lincoln and shattered the entrance to the Oregon Historical Society in Portland's South Park blocks late Sunday before moving on to other areas in downtown, smashing storefronts and engaging in other acts of destruction. Bravo. I'm clapping for the Democrats. This is on you. This is your city. This is your state. It's your jurisdiction, your senators, all that stuff. They smashed up the Historical Society. Now, come on. Now they're just coming after American history. Police declared the event a riot and ordered people rampaging through the city streets to disperse, but did not directly intervene until nearly an hour after the first statue fell. The crowd scattered when police cruisers flooded the area, and officers in tactical gear appeared to make several arrests. Protest organizers had promoted the event on social media as an Indigenous Peoples' Day of Rage. Monday is the federally observed holiday of Christopher Columbus, but many states and cities now recognize the day instead as Indigenous Peoples' Day over concerns that Christopher Columbus's arrival in the Americas helped launch centuries of violence against indigenous populations. The organizers had signaled their aggressive stance for the night, calling for direct action and demanding that the video live streamers and photographers who had become staples of such events stay away. Oh, now they don't want evidence. I have a question for you guys, okay? I'm part Irish. I was wondering, at what point does demanding back stolen land become kind of weird? So, what if I started making videos where I demanded Northern Ireland back? I've been to Northern Ireland once. I am part Irish. So I'm like a quarter or more Irish. So a decent amount of me is Irish. Could I start going around smashing up, statues of British people and be like, I want Ireland back. You're on stolen land. Darn United Kingdom. It's been a long time. But is that weird? Where's that line? I mean, me being a kind of, global citizen, as the fringe right likes to call people like me. I have a lot of stolen land I can complain about. I don't. I just mind my own business. Look, there's a lot of atrocities in the past. I'm not going to go complain about Genghis Khan. I want that land back. Genghis. Urgh. Yeah, because, or the Japanese. Dude, I live in America. Life's pretty good. I got my plot of land. I've laid my claim, and I'm going to mind my own business and just try not to infringe on anybody else. What if someone came back to where I lived and was like, this is my land, I want it back? Oh, yeah, well, it's actually my land because my ancestor was oppressed by your ancestor. Nuh-uh, prove it. What about, indigenous people? Because Native Americans were stealing each other's land all the time. So, what happens if, they keep going back through, various historical texts trying to figure out who was the original person to actually have the land? Which reminds me of this really great video. It's called This Land is My Land. I think it's called this. And it's basically showing all the warring factions who declared that the Fertile Crescent, I think it's called, was belonging to their culture. So Israel, Palestine. And it's basically one person singing the song about how the land is theirs, but the person keeps changing. It's a different, it's a Roman and then a Palestinian and whatever. And is that the game we're going to play? To figure out where it's just absurd. We can't do that. They say people in the crowd were repeatedly admonished not to film. Passerby who happened upon the group were ordered by demonstrators to stop filming or delete photographs, including an apartment resident who had lasers shined in his eyes and liquid thrown in his face as he appeared to shoot video of the scene from his terrace. Whoa! They're attacking locals, man. This is nuts. The group, about 200 strong, marched through downtown Portland, at one point occupying all 4 lanes of West Burnside Street. Most dressed head to toe in black. Many wore body armor, carried shields, or wielded nightsticks and other weapons. As the crowd reached the South Park blocks, some threw chains on ropes on the Roosevelt statue. a bronze sculpture originally titled Theodore Roosevelt Rough Rider, as others took a blowtorch to its base and splattered it with red paint. They began to pull until the statue rocked from side to side before falling down at 8:51 p.m. The crowd erupted in cheers as dance music played on a large portable speaker. I think it's funny that people ignore this and they laugh at it. And it may be too late. You know, regular people don't want to be involved in this stuff. But what we're seeing is revolution. Now, maybe it doesn't succeed. Maybe it's not going to result in, you know, a new glorious leader or anything like that. But this is revolution. I was in Ukraine when they pulled down statues, okay? And then they ejected their, I think Yanukovych was the president, and then got a new government. And it's revolution, man. Tearing down statues is an element of this. Whether or not they succeed is an entirely different story. But I'll tell you what happens. The revolutionaries, as they call themselves, are going around and destroying things and pulling down statues. And they've been escalating. They lie to you about their intentions. Oh, it's just a Confederate. Who likes them? And you're like, that's a good point. I don't like them. I mean, who does? Literally. But then I get worried. I'm like, it's really unsafe. They pulled a statue down and hit somebody in the head, like seriously injured the guy. I see that and I'm like, okay, that's bad. You're hurting people and this is dangerous. Perhaps we should vote on removing these things. And they say, yeah, but when we try that, nobody agrees with us. And I'm kind of like, well, that's kind of how things work in a constitutional republic with democratically elected leaders. We have referendum and a democratic process in many smaller jurisdictions for how we would deal with something like this. They do it anyway. They convinced the left, the liberals in this country, that it's just the bad people. Then they started tearing down George Washington and Jefferson. And where was the media to be like, yo, maybe a little too much? They said, well, they were slave owners. Let's run an op-ed. Now Abraham Lincoln? Wow. They want to tear down a statue that shows Abraham Lincoln like breaking the chains of a slave. And the argument is that from their perspective, they should never have had, like, they don't look up to a man who is letting them go. And I think it's a fair point. Like, dude you shouldn't have been enslaved in the first place. We're not going to look up to the guy who's like, okay, I now agree to grant you rights. They had rights from the get-go. But the thing is, Abraham Lincoln, opposed slavery, as did most of the North, as did most of this country, even during the Revolutionary War. Problem was we had southern slave states and they were expanding. And so we fought a very, very bloody war over it. They want to tear down a statue that was paid for and put up by former slaves to honor Abraham Lincoln. This should make it obvious to each and every one of you. They are not talking about some kind of end of racism. They're just destroying the Portland Historical Society. What is that? When was that built? How is that? Oh, it's all white supremacy. It's white Eurocentric worldview or whatever. Over the course of his life, Roosevelt expressed hostility toward Native Americans. That's true. In fact, the Declaration of Independence does as well. The group then turned to the nearby Abraham Lincoln statue, pulling it to the ground at 8:59 p.m. Spray painted on the base on the statue was Dakota 38, a reference to 38 Dakota men executed after the Dakota U.S. War of 1862, in the largest mass execution in a single day in American history. Lincoln commuted the same sentence handed down by a military tribunal for 265 others. Wait, he commuted the same? What, he saved people? They pulled him down because of it? 1862. Wow. 158 years. I am impressed. Seriously. I wonder how far I can go back to hold a grudge. Oh, man. I got ancestors going way back. I'm part Dutch, too. I'm part French. I can be mad at everybody. Think about it. I'm part German, part Irish, so I can be mad at the Germans and mad for them. How stupid is that logic? I'm part Korean, so I'm really mad at the Japanese. Oh, wait, I'm also part Japanese. So I'm mad at the Koreans, too. This is so dumb. Maybe this doesn't work for someone like me. I don't know, because, like these alt-right people were saying that Tim Pool has no cultural identity because I'm like a variety of different ethnic backgrounds. Maybe that's true. I am not going to be mad at Japanese people from my Korean side, nor mad at the Koreans from my Japanese side, nor the Irish for the British, or I'm also part British. Yeah, I'm just everything. You know what I mean? I am part British and I am part Irish. It's different. based on, Ancestry.com. So should my Irish side be mad at my British side mad at my Irish side? Should my British side decide that Northern Ireland should remain the United Kingdom, but my Irish side argue against it? It literally makes no sense. Why are we even bothering with these kinds of conversations? I don't know, to be completely honest. I think it's patently absurd. But while this is going on and the left is destroying history and, kind of getting away with it, I have to wonder, what say you, New York, about civil unrest? It's not like, New York has decided with this ongoing unrest, they're going to say, target a specific ethnic minority group and arrest them. Okay, actually, oh man, I can only laugh at the sheer absurdity of where we are as a country. Orthodox Jews rally outside journalists' home in NYC after anti-lockdown leader Heshi Tischler is arrested over assault on the reporter as city fines 5 synagogues $15,000 for COVID violations. Who did you fine? De Blasio? Cuomo? When the Antifa Black Lives Matter people were going around vandalizing property and ransacking stores. Did you fine any of those organizations? How about Thousand Currents, the nonprofit that organizes for Black Lives Matter? Nah, they good. When these people went out, there was no beef. They said, Bill de Blasio actually was like, you know what? I'm going to paint your message all over the ground. Welcome to our brave new world. They're destroying the historical society. They are tearing down statues. And quite literally, they are starting to arrest Jewish people. Is there a red flag here for somebody? You've got overt identitarian groups that believe hard work is a trait of white people, and their allies who paint their message literally just went out and arrested a Jewish man and fined synagogues. Apparently in the book, In Defense of Looting, which is, In Defense of Looting, they argue that they believe, I think it's Asians and Jewish people, according to this book, are the face of capital. That's what they're claiming. Can I wave a flag? I have a big red flag. Should I just wave a red flag? Should I get a plane and trail a big red flag flying over the city? Because I feel like I'm warning people about what all of this means. And so long as it's under the name left, it's okay. The left, of course, being a reference to revolution, right? The revolutionary French and the French Revolution versus the right that wanted to kind of keep things the same. So does that mean that the left is always going to be good? No. Because right now they're targeting Jewish people. Come on, man. Like, what are you doing? What are we supposed to do about this? What's going on in New York to the Jewish community, to me, is like a whole new level of psychosis. It's terrifying, to be completely honest. They have a constitutional right to practice their religion, no matter to gather how they see fit. You can't change that. In fact, the Supreme Court in numerous states has shot down these unconstitutional edicts, saying you can't stop them from engaging in their constitutionally protected activities, which includes worshiping at a synagogue. And the city's coming after them. Here's the most important point about all of this, and the reason why I bring up the Jewish community. Antifa is given carte blanche. They're tearing down Abraham Lincoln, and where is anyone to stop them? Now, I know the police try, but many of these people are getting released by the DA. The same thing happened in New York. Now, let's make one thing clear. They argue the reason the Jewish people need to be arrested and have their events shut down is because they're hotspots. It is a fact. There are other hotspots in New York that are not being targeted. This is called an excuse from an anti-Semite. So what you get? You've got an identitarian leftist mayor, Bill de Blasio, who paints Black Lives Matter, which is aligned with, many of these high-profile Black Lives Matter activists are fans of Farrakhan, who hates the Jews. And this is what's starting to happen in New York City. There's no excuse for what they're doing to these people, man. They arrested a guy. Now, that's crazy. So what should any of us do as this is happening? Well, I'll tell you what, the first thing you got to do is speak up against it. The good news is it seems like the good guys are winning for now. And what I mean by that is the Supreme Court is ruling against these unconstitutional edicts. Start suing. You don't need to go out and rally to the Orthodox Jewish community. You file all the lawsuits in the world. Go after them through legislation because you will win through the judicial process, I should say. You'll win. They can't do this. And until the lawsuit happens, they're going to keep pushing this. But I'll tell you, it's scary, man. I have to imagine all these people are voting for Trump. And that's New York. Seriously, New York is where these protests are happening. They're waving Trump flags. And they tell me that Trump is going to lose. That scares me. Are you the person that's going to sit back and say you're okay with the government locking up Jewish people for practicing their religion while ignoring other hotspots in New York? Are you going to say it's okay that the man who quite literally ended slavery with the Emancipation Proclamation had his statue toppled? That's not okay. What is this? These people want racism. They want it. They use it. They want the other. They want enemies so they can rally people and say, look at that person. They're the bad guy. I'll tell you what the bad guy is. Ideology. The specific ideologies of tribal warfare that we need to resist. We are the great American melting pot. I don't care where you come from, what you believe, gender identity, any of that stuff. We work together. We argue ideas. We don't tolerate this. This needs to be the end of de Blasio. Well, de Blasio can't run, so he won't be mayor anyway. But Cuomo needs to get out. And now we're hearing Joe Biden may make Cuomo AG. Talk about a nightmare scenario. I want you to think about that. As Cuomo specifically targets Jewish people in New York, imagine what he would do as the attorney general. Don't take my word for it, though. I'm just a dude reading the news on the internet, I guess. Read it for yourself. Kind of crazy, isn't it? I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. It is my main channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.